Hi guys, welcome back. Today we've got a very cool guest, Theo Priestley, who is the CEO of Metanomic, and one of my favorite influencers or feeds on LinkedIn for various different reasons. But he's got an outsider kind of opinion, or rather an agitate. What did you call? How did you describe yourself? An
Yeah, an
agitator.
agitator. Yeah.
An agitator of the norm, which I think is much needed in the space, because sometimes we can get lost in the hot air and the fuzz that tends to come with a lot of social media and influencers. So Theo, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for being my guest. Yeah, over to you. I want to hear all about what you're up to, and some of your opinions and views on the general landscape and what the metaverse might be.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Philip, for inviting me on. I appreciate the support as well in terms of my candor on social media and various sites as well. Yeah, so I mean, like you just said, I mean, I run a company called Metanomic. We actually spun out of a video game play to earn video game studio back almost a year ago now, actually, officially in September. We were launching to build a play to earn game very much akin to something like EVE Online. So for me, it was fascinating to see what people considered play to earn. And we kind of sort of looked at it from an economic standpoint. You know, what does a real economy look like, and then how does play to earn kind of sort of support that? And through that journey, we discovered that a lot of the industry, probably about 99.9% of it, still uses Excel or spreadsheets to actually design gameplay mechanics, tokenomics, game economies. And the term game economy is actually very broad in the industry. It does actually mean everything to do with how the game plays. So everything starts as a spreadsheet, your character leveling up, your stats, how many hit points a boss takes, spawn rates, drop rates, etc. It all starts on spreadsheets, lots of them. They're all interlinked. They all have macros and everything else. And I kind of thought this was quite unwieldy and unsustainable for the 21st century where we are today, and especially in terms of tokenomics. So, you know, from a play to earn perspective, you're involving real money. There's real money involved, whether it's fiat, whether it's crypto, you know, and people are obviously benefiting or losing money as well at the same time. So you can't really rely on that on a spreadsheet. So I kind of said we need some tools internally to manage this, to help us design what the economy would look like, and get away from the reliance on spreadsheets. And that's where the idea of the Metanomic engine came in, which was essentially a sort of cloud-based platform that allows people to design gameplay mechanics, automatically balance them, so we have like really good balanced gameplay. Everybody has fun, and also the money in, money out, the sort of on ramps and off ramps are kind of balanced as well in terms of tokenomics, and then run it in real time. So where some tools, where Excel and some other sort of tools fall short, is once you basically design it and simulate it, you have to go all the way back into the game engine and actually hard code it and and all that kind of sort of thing. Whereas we just thought, let's take away as much of the pain as possible and actually have a runtime platform that you can just use APIs and SDKs for your game. So that's where that idea came from. It was pretty much two months into the project of designing a game when I thought, actually, this is something that benefits the industry rather than just one game project. So we kind of pivoted really hard, and we decided to go all in on building the platform. And then midway in May, actually, we acquired an AI company that allows us to basically examine how the behavior of players in these games, how they act in the context of the game and sort of read their intent. So there are the kind of sort of classic traits like miner, explorer, killer, whatever kind of sort of thing. Bartle, I think it is. But what we decided to do is actually dig further into behavioral traits and actually build out a proper classification list. And that just lets the developer understand what the psyche is of the player. And that allows them to, look at different monetization strategies, look at retention strategies, build out a content plan for like releases. So, if you're doing season passes or stuff, you can drop things that are actually specific for a core part of your audience, and how much of that audience is going to engage in it in advance. So that's the kind of sort of two, and the two pillars or the two lines of business that we have kind of feed into each other because it's all about data, really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, and I've spoken to a number of Web3 projects, and none of them are really taking this data mindset seriously, or they're not taking it as a priority in their rollout plans. What are you seeing in terms of the adoption on your side, and like, what is the type of responses that you get from founders when you have these type of discussions? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these games are probably inflating numbers. Like, I mean, it's not even only Web3 that inflate numbers. Mm-hmm. Facebook has been notorious for inflating their user base for years, right? And every time you scratch beyond the surface, there's always, changes of algorithms and this and that, and there's an excuse theory, right? Web3 is probably going to have the same type of defense mechanism because the numbers aren't there yet. Like, if you really go into these metaverses, the numbers, it's nowhere close to critical mass. What is the type of response that you're getting from founders in like embracing the data mindset?
I think for very early founders, very early game projects, they're not thinking that way at all. It's all very much a case of let's drive some numbers or KPIs loosely based around community stats and Discord and Twitter and things like that. Yeah. They're not real because they're not generating any data at that point in time. It's not really a consideration in terms of, well, why do we need to look at what our players are doing? We just launch the game and see what happens. Yeah. But of course, the power in that is obviously you should be able to not only simulate, the what ifs kind of scenarios, but by using once you launch the game, you start bringing in historical data into those simulations, and then obviously that allows you to update your models to understand what's really going on in the game, and then be able to project forward. And of course, data analysts or data scientists are probably one of the last things that are on people's minds, primarily because they outsource a lot of the work anyway. Yeah. If you look at a lot of these projects, they don't have the in-house teams, so they basically farm it out to work for hire studios to get an MVP running as quickly as possible. Yeah. Speak to someone who knows a bit about tokenomics. Again, spreadsheets. Stick it on a spreadsheet. Simulate it. With some VB macros, and then Bob's your uncle. You've got an MVP of a game that you can take to market, launch a token with, get investors excited with.
Exactly. It's the ultimate bootstrapping scenario, right? It's startups, but even more lean because there isn't that in-house methodology taking place. I read a case study the other day, and I wanted to comment on LinkedIn, but I commented and I deleted it because it was a case study and there was zero numbers or zero data related to the case study. And I thought, that's not a case study. That's like, it's just, that's airy, it's hot air again. Like I was questioning, like, when will enterprise take us seriously? And the only time enterprise, blue chip enterprise is going to take us seriously if we back what we claim with numbers and data. So, like, I mean, what are you seeing from an enterprise level, and how do we bridge those gaps between enterprise and Web3 founding startup methodologies?
Well, I mean, if you look at enterprise, enterprise has been adopting blockchain for quite a while. And of course, it's not crypto related because it's a distributed ledger technology. So you've got oil and gas, you've got finance, you've got, supply chain management, all these kind of sort of things, pharma and hospitals, they've all implemented blockchain as a foundational layer because they understand what it is. They're not really interested in the kind of sort of crypto side of things because there's no need to inject that kind of that monetary kind of side of things. But they are, that's the difference, is that in terms of the maturity of thinking, because there is a kind of teenage arrogance in the sort of Web3 in the crypto industry, which is, we know better and we're going to show you how it's done. And then what you're actually seeing, in the case of your white paper or the that particular research piece is the same mistakes that the enterprise has been made 20 years ago, and then basically woke up and got over itself, and then and did things right. So it's a bit of a strange one.
It is. I mean, there was also a piece that went a little bit viral about Apple, the potential of Apple adopting blockchain or cryptos and stuff. And what we need to realize is that these organizations like Apple is so big, they make so much money. I think that there will be a time and place, or there will be gaps where blockchain can service, a need. But why would you think that Apple or Google or any, I mean, I know Google's, they've got their own Hashgraph, or they're working with a collaboration in Hashgraph, and it's the Hedera Hashgraph, which we're working with. It's quite an exciting one. But like, why would Apple actually want to take crypto seriously? Why would they want to adopt something that might derail shareholder value in the traditional sense?
I think they would only adopt it if it made sense for the consumer. And that would be something like where bridging out Apple Pay, for example, and allowing crypto and NFT storage in Apple Pay. That's the only kind of sort of thing I see. And obviously, people are saying, oh, Apple are going to build a metaverse, or Apple are launching their glasses, which has been going on for about 10, 15 years now. But Apple is notorious at doing things when it makes sense for them. And what they do is they sit on the sidelines and they wait to see everybody else fail. And then they'll come out and do a keynote and says, "Oh, it's revolutionary," and blah, blah, blah. They use all those lovely keywords that Tim Cook and Steve Jobs used to use. But it's only when it makes sense for them, and only when it makes sense because they are a giant walled garden as well.
Exactly.
That's the other thing. So I'm pretty sure that Apple would be using blockchain itself in some part of its supply chain management processes. But crypto itself, I think, is going to be one where they'll wait and see the adoption cycle across other consumer-facing, big brands. And I think that might come from people like Salesforce bringing brands in using their NFT cloud and allowing them to explore in a safe, almost like a sandbox environment kind of sort of thing that's pretty de-risked.
What brands? I mean, I know we had a conversation about Disney. What brands do you think are well ahead of the curve on all of this?
Oh, you only have to look at a few. Again, Nike, Adidas, obviously, because they had their NFT collections, and Nike with its purchase, with its sort of acquisition strategy. But Nike, Adidas, McDonald's, Starbucks, because they're going to start exploring with reward schemes and things like that. Disney, because they think a much broader piece. This is like a universe that they kind of sort of consider. So how do we tag NFTs and crypto in with the whole Disney resort experience, the membership side, that premium feel around the consumer and making you feel a part of this whole, their whole ecosystem. McLaren doing, McLaren, Gucci, who else? Alfa Romeo with their NFT-based sort of service records. Again, different use cases, but bringing people in or bringing the customer base in different ways. And then you've got sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just go on the sort of the revenue and the sort of, the community centric ideology that Web3 comes with. There was a post also about Adidas, and they made something like $23 million or something in 24 hours, and they engaged with 21,000 people within the community. Now, I'm kind of sitting there going, firstly, $23 million, dollars is not a lot to Adidas, and 21,000 people might have been previously Adidas customers anyway. So do you think these are numbers that we should be taking note of, or is it such early stages that, it's just part of the journey of growth? It's good, it's positive, it shows that there's a massive potential, but is it something where, these brands are going to drop everything that they're doing and they go, okay, this is the future and we need to allocate reallocate all our resources towards what potential this might hold?
Right. So, I mean, Adidas is 23 million compared to Nike's 118 million. It's kind of like a drop in the ocean, in a sense. But at the same time, we talk about community a lot, but a lot of these projects are actually bringing in people who are not native to the brand. So I think there's an interesting swing here where there are people who didn't really care about the brand before, and to be honest, I don't think they really care about the brand even after. It's more it's that speculative purchase of getting in early and then being in as part of the secondary sales as well. So you buy the item, you watch it skyrocket, you sell it, and then you're getting secondary sale value on that as well. That's, if you see every major game project for instance, the hyped community numbers are really interesting because everybody's there for just purely the whitelist and the token generation event. And then once it's launched or once the token is generated and everybody's made their money, it becomes a barren wasteland.
Exactly.
And I think that's the problem with most NFTs at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a brand thinking about what I can do in this space, I think you have to really understand the real dynamics behind everything around these success stories, because, you know, certainly your brand is probably never going to generate the kind of, you know, numbers that Nike and Adidas have, or Disney have. You know, you might do, you know, you'd be more akin to the Chris Browns, where, you know, even though you have like a giant following, no one gave no one bought into it.
You know, I mean, I saw that, and I only was exposed to that project post fact. So, like, you know, I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of these you know, these labels make are probably hiring the wrong strategists, the wrong agencies up front, and they don't get in the right forums. And obviously NFT marketing or crypto marketing is very expensive. Like, my background is more Web2, where we kind of, like, you know, worked with moderate budgets. We worked very much with a CPA or ROI, you know, mindset. You go out, anything that you do within NFT, if you really want to get noticed, is a lot of money. It is expensive to get on some of these newsletter drops. Is like, you're talking $60,000, $70,000. Back in the day, if I'd proposed $60,000, $70,000 to a client, I would have been shot. Like, there's no ways that those type of budgets would have been allocated. But there's so much money to be made, but it's also very expensive to get into the right forums and the right exposure and get the right influencers on board. It's a very tricky mix. Like, do you think, and let's go beyond the whole, you know, the aggregated Bored Apes, the CryptoPunks and all these guys. They are obviously large or hugely successful, and they will continue to do so regardless of the FUD that might be spreading on the sort of the sidelines with rider rips and all that kind of stuff. But they are kind of the benchmarks, and everyone goes after these benchmarks thinking that is how we have to market ourselves. This is, you know, that is what it means. But no one, or very few projects, are going to have that type of budget to get that type of exposure. Do you think that there's a secret formula? Do you think there's ways to fight smartly, you know, under your weight division?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what it was Nickelodeon. So Nickelodeon, you would think, has a massive following, and they basically use a turnkey service to basically promote it and sell and whatnot. And I can't remember who the agency was, but it struck me as the fact that it failed miserably. And the reason it failed miserably is because this turnkey agency basically just reuses the same the community and strategy and influences each and every time. So you're basically selling to the same people. And I think what brands really have to understand is that you have to know you have to remember that you've got an audience already, and you have to know who your audience is, which is why I think Nike, which is why I think McDonald's and Starbucks and everything else, their efforts will probably succeed because they know their customers inside out. Whereas all these ones who are trying to sort of quickly get in on the rush and whatnot, they're pumping out an NFT collection or some kind of sort of initiative, and then they're going after the typical crypto crowd to sort of bring them in just to get some cash through the door and whatnot. It's going to fail because nobody actually cares about your brand. So what you're actually doing is you're doing more brand harm. Yeah. And harm to your reputation with your existing customer base who are sitting there scratching their head trying to figure out why the hell you went and done this and didn't actually speak to them or involve them.
Yeah.
You know, so
it comes back to data again, right? So a lot of these organizations that aren't taking data seriously, they don't have segmentation silos, you know, put in place. They have no idea what their current customer looks like. And then they're just doing it because of the hype wagon that they're jumping on. Like you said, it's a cash grab. They're there to, you know, try to hype up something and just get as much money in return. And they're doing a lot of brand damage in the process. But it goes back to what you guys offer in terms of data and analytics and providing a service that gives you a better understanding of what that customer base is all about and what they might want. So you're building predictive models around that, right?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things is that we give the data back to the developer, whether it's Web 2 or Web 3. So we're actually having conversations with traditional game developers who have their own in-house tools, but they don't have what we have, which is great for us, obviously. But the idea is, you know, for us to basically ingest real-time data and give you the dashboard and the insights back for you to do whatever you want. So if you want to build more predictive modeling around this extra layer of data on top of what you already know, then, you know, knock yourself out. You know, we've made a pretty hard stance around we're not selling the data on, we're not giving it to third parties, we're not using it ourselves. This is purely something that comes in, goes back out to the developer, and it's up to them to sort of do what they want with it, kind of sort of thing. And then we just improve the product by getting the feedback from them. Or what if you could actually add another layer? What if you added this behavioral trait, and it's just a case of retraining the algorithm to look for different data points again, and then giving them that insight.
Yeah. So, you're talking to maybe a Web3 project that are bootstrapping, they've got limited budgets. Something like what you're saying, or rather what you're providing, sounds like a Rolls-Royce scenario, like a Rolls-Royce solution. Is your service and product available that can be plugged into multiple different types of available budgets? Or does it look at the larger type, solution?
No, I mean, we price per million events, I think it is, which is pretty standard. So I mean, if you're a small game and you've only got like a couple of thousand people or whatnot, then obviously you're not going to be generating the same volume of events. But as long as you've got the budget, then you can basically get insight from that. That's the whole point. It doesn't matter if you've got 2,000 players generating events, or if you've got 20,000 or 200,000, like a big MMO, or 2 million. Kind of sort of thing. Obviously, if you're that scale, then you've got the money to sort of pay for something that will give you a lot more insight and depth into your data analysis. But for the smaller studio, yeah, I mean, you could pay for as little as you want, just by sending, smaller subsets of data.
Okay, and it plugs in, like you mentioned earlier on, it's API based, so you could plug it into like a data studio, and you could get a more holistic view of what it looks like from an on-site Web 2 perspective, and then what that cloud solution looks like in terms of integration with Web 3.
Yeah, sure. We've supplying it. We've got an API already, and we're actually just about to complete development on an SDK as well. So you've got avenues of how you can integrate with us.
Awesome. This is, for me, something that is so lacking for a lot of the projects out there, and it's vital. Not only to understand success and scale factors, but the goal of growth is to understand what the hell is working and what's not working, and continuously optimizing. And we've forgotten that whole data orientation. And I think this is an exciting space, especially for you guys. I think you're well positioned to be in a formidable position moving forward as the industry matures, and as more budgets, or rather sort of blue chip budgets, come into the scenario, and they go, okay, cool, if I'm going to be spending $1 million with you, I need to understand what that ROI factor is, or what my return will look like, and how are we going to be optimizing those budgets forward. So I think that you guys are in a very, very formidable position. I'll be keeping a close eye on that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the bullshit bingo that happens, right? So and sometimes my skin crawls a little bit when we throw the words out there, like even Web3 these days are like, sometimes when it's being used or overly used, I get, Metaverse is also something that's being thrown around there like a beach ball at a Nickelback concert. It's really, it's becoming way too much. And everyone's got a different theory, and it's like I said, it is bullshit bingo at the end of the day, because everyone wants to capitalize on a exposure perspective. They want to be as part of this this nonchalant of early adopters, right? There was that list that came out on LinkedIn, the 300 top influencers, whatever. I made the list and I was like, really? Okay. And then I looked through the list and I was like, a lot of these guys, it's a boys club.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a boys club, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to clean up my feed on a regular basis, because I don't want to feed my own biases, because, and this is why, again, I like the way your style or your approach to the content that's put out there, because you don't hold back. You're polite, but you don't hold back, and you kind of like, you call it as it is. I saw you commented on someone's post on how brands can get into the Web3 space yesterday, and I was like, spot on. I almost want to like celebrate every post that you do, but I won't become I won't become that guy. But it is so important to be able to have these these bias checkers in life, because we can easily fall into this algorithmic cycle of events, and we're getting fed and we forget about that it is a debate, it is a struggle between the old and new, and that's what growth is all about, right? So what do you think is the reality of what we're sitting on right now? I mean, obviously there's an enormous potential behind it. What do you think the definition is? What do you think it might look like? And what do you think some of the biggest pitfalls are right now that we need to be addressing and taking seriously for us to get into mainstream?
So yes, we are. So I think it's fair to say that we are early stage, but it's also fair to say that we've been here before. I mean, I keep pointing people to really sort of 15, 16-year-old articles that are written all about Second Life, for example. If we talk about the metaverse here, first of all, and you know, we've had Second Life, we've had different large virtual world or endeavors, and again, it's that kind of sort of Web3 metaverse teenage arrogance where it's just like, oh, we know better, and nothing else happened before this point in time. And it's like, well, actually, we have. And in fact, if you look at all the, you know, there's a wiki page that basically has a list of business articles written about the metaverse and Second Life from 2006 all the way up to 2012. And that's 6 years worth of people saying this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. The metaverse is here. Let's all make money. Like, businesses are all going to move lock, stock, and barrel into the metaverse and abandon websites and stuff. And of course, lo and behold, what happened? Nothing. We had a bit of a blip, and then everybody left. And we're kind of sort of here again. And now we've got entrants like Meta coming in and spending billions to basically move a 3 billion sized audience from Facebook into this sort of immersive world, you know, and so it feels different, but some of the attitudes are very much reminiscent of what it was back then. And obviously, we've a lot of the people that developed these platforms 15, 16 years ago are kind of like shaking their head now because nobody's talking to them about the lessons that they could learn and you know, and the pitfalls to avoid.
Yeah, spot on.
In terms of Web3, I find Web3 really interesting because, you know, my beliefs and my opinions are, you know, the ideology kind of sort of sits with the open metaverse as well, and the idea of an open metaverse and free and decentralized. And we're not building Web3 at the moment. I mean, I will just categorically come out and say that, you know, right now what we're doing is just building another layer on top of Web2, and actually compounding a lot of the grip that some of the bigger organizations have by giving them even more sort of power. It's not decentralized at all. Even if you look at some of the platforms there, they're all sitting on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or Tencent Cloud even. You know, none of that is decentralized infrastructure. They're all using Unreal or Unity, centralized companies with big centralized ecosystems. You know, so and yet there are open source alternatives left, right, and center, but nobody's bothering to use them. So
well, it's easier, right? It's easier.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's just laziness as well. It's apathy to actually put the effort in. I mean, when you look at the web when it first started back in the 90s, you know, you had to learn. You know, it took 2 years to basically have 50 websites. You know, so people took 2 years, you know, messing around, trying to build web servers, trying to understand how HTTP works and all that kind of sort of hand coding everything, you know, having sort of browser based stuff that, you know, they were, you know, browsers didn't really exist either until Netscape came along and really kind of made it accessible. So, you know, that to me is where Web3 should be sitting, which is this experimental thing that sits out in the side that nobody, you know, that has a lot of hacking together and people are building on the side. And I do think there's a coexisting relationship here. It's not, I don't think that we should be building on top of what exists already. I think we should be building completely separate, and then there'll be this coexisting entity, which is Web2 versus people who want to live a completely open and decentralized life online. And then at some point there might be a great migration where people think, oh, fuck this, I'm off, and I'm going to go here, kind of sort of thing.
But that migration is going to take a lot of heavy lifting, and it's like, you know, it's interesting, obviously, that Facebook got to where they are currently at, and how they've changed their strategy to obviously try to position themselves as a metaverse, but it's not ultimately going to be a decentralized platform ever, right? I mean, their shareholders are never going to say, all right, we've made enough money, let's hand it back to the population. Let's lose our only primary revenue stream, and that's the data set of the customer base that we sit on. They're never going to give that up.
No.
And if we think that, we're all delusioned. But again, also Facebook is a little bit of a graveyard. I mean, if you look at the early the early, or rather the younger generations, they're not really on Facebook anymore. It is an older generation that tends to aggregate on Facebook. You know, and I'm not talking about the general Facebook ecosystem. I'm not talking about WhatsApp or Instagram and you know the other likes. But it's going to be interesting what that migration looks like. I mean, you know, if it's going to be possible or not. Decentralization. Don't you think decentralization is also just an ideology? Like, I mean, regulation is going to come in. It's going to take an effect, right? And for things to be regulated, there are going to be these central forces at play. Don't you think decentralization is just an ideology? It's like, it's nice to know, or it's utopic, you know, like we can work towards it, but do you think ultimately we'll ever be able to achieve something like that?
No, I mean, I think people are thinking very short term in terms of timescales. You know, everybody's thinking 6 months to 2 years kind of sort of thing. And this is driven by a lot of investment thesis. So, you know, build something, get out the door, make 10x, 20x, exit and start again. You know, like I said, the web kicked off in the 90s. It's taken 30, 40 years to get to where it is today in this particular iteration. And I think we have to sort of think about, if we're going to go for decentralization, you know, we have to start thinking 20 years ahead. You know, what's that landscape going to look like? Now, yes, decentralization is partly ideology, partly technology driven. Again, a lot of it is being driven from a technology point of view, whereas it's a very human problem to solve. You know, like DAOs, for example, decentralized autonomous organizations. Everybody is going, yeah, DAOs are great, blah blah blah, and smart contracts and blockchain and tokens and things. And I'm sitting scratching my head going, yeah, but DAOs are filled with people, and you know, if you've got a DAO with 2,000 people, all trying to make a decision, you've got anarchy.
Yeah, anarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, democracy is.
Yeah.
Does it work? Does it work?
It doesn't work. No.
Do we vote in favor of ultimately what's best for us? No. Very seldom is the case, right? And democracy can also be manipulated and all that. So whenever people talk to me about DAOs, I go, I love the concept. I think it's great. There's a role to be played, but there'll always be a central team doing the heavy lifting. There'll always be that central team. Like, you know, people are part of these DAOs. That's not their livelihood. That's not their 9 to 5 or whatever hour, you know, you work every day. You know, there's going to be that central team that has to do the work, right? You can vote on the work. You can have an input. You can have a stakeholdership in the work and the outcome. But will you do the work itself? Probably not.
That's the other thing as well with DAOs, is that you've got a good, you know, you've got a huge community of people who like to talk, who like to vote. Ideas. They want to put a stake in it, but nobody's going to build shit. That's the thing. I mean, I wrote a couple of pieces actually on piracy. Piracy as in the ye olden pirates of the Caribbean kind of sort of thing. And they had a really interesting setup where, you know, there was the captain, and then there was the first mate and everything else like that. And that governance model was pretty much what a DAO is, which is you've got the crewmates who basically all had a share in the booty, but the share of the booty was basically divvied in sort of smaller distributions as you get down from the captain. But it was proper trickle down effect. And then obviously the captain was in charge, and the captain's word was law. And the only person who could basically countermand the captain was the first mate, I think. And then the captain could be removed entirely if it went against the actual principles of the ship itself, of what the ship was there for. And I think, you know, these kind of, you know, all these different democratic models. In fact, piracy was actually the first democratic model, governance model, which is great. And I think people should pay more attention to history. You know, those who don't pay attention to history are doomed to repeat it. So, you know, pay attention to what's happened before. There are some democratic models that I think would work really well in a DAO, especially in terms of financialization and authority and stakeholder sort of input. But you need that central governance model. You need people to actually make the decisions, and then you need the people to execute. And right now, DAOs are filled with people who don't want to execute.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is one of the pain points. I mean, I've been in Web3 for a couple of years now. One of the pain points was I was always surrounded by great ideas, but very few execution. So this is, I think, one of the biggest problems. Everyone, because it's not a their sole livelihood, right? It's something that they spend the evenings doing, and they contribute, and they feel like, they're, checkbox, I've done something to help the outcome. But yeah, what do you think about the idea of like a Google or a Facebook, or I mean, Facebook has tried something similar, but a Google or an Apple, as an example, issuing a DAO token? What do you think the potential of that, just additional layer, might have for stakeholdership and also community involvement and governance?
Well, that's why they issue shares.
Exactly.
So why have a DAO?
To attract a new audience, because like, I mean, use me as an example. I don't have a single share. Okay? I'm 41 years old. I know I look much younger. Thank you very much. But I'm 41 years old. I don't have a single share. All of my investments are all tied up in Web3 or, Bitcoin or these type of, technologies. Sure. If Apple offered a DAO token, I would buy it. And I wonder of how many of people like me are out there that do not trust the stock markets and all these sort of things, that understand crypto and want to get into traditional organizations like Apple and Microsoft and all these other blue chips.
But what would be the benefit though? What would be the benefit to you, and what would be the benefit to Apple? I mean, if Apple really wanted 21 million people bought a DAO token, are they really going to listen to 21 million people who are going to say, I want to bring back the iPod?
But it could facilitate like an incubator type program where, a lot of these big organizations have incubators in-house, right? So like whatever that spin-off might be within the broader holding might have potential. And as a DAO owner, you have influence over the outcome of that. And also you have ownership and custodianship of that potential incubated project.
Steve Jobs famously said, don't ask the people what they want, because they don't actually know.
Apple was a terrible example.
And then Ogilvy said, things like surveys are nonsense because people don't say what they do, don't do what they say. And there's a third aspect to it. And I think that's very kind of sort of indicative of those two kind of sort of quotes, and of from completely different angles, are very indicative of what a DAO is, especially for an organization like Apple, for example. Is like, if you gave the power of decision making or the power of ideation to people within this kind of sort of group, I don't think you would get, however many people, say 2,000 people were in this group, you get 2,000 different ideas, and each one would say that their idea is better than the other. And it would just be an absolute mess. So I don't think owning a governance token or anything else like that, or launching a governance token or a DAO, would really do any of these organizations any good at all.
Interesting. Well, let's see. Let's see. I don't know. Like, I mean, I would like to purchase one if ever given the opportunity, and I just wonder how many of like-minded individuals there might be out there. But anyway, so okay. I think we're running on time also, so I'm well aware of that. I think let's get into some closing thoughts here. What do you see the next, and also actually a point that you were talking about, every project working on the next 6 months or so, and it's very short-term thinking. It also relates strongly to the token behind the project, right? So a lot of these projects have like a liquidation strategy that gets them addicted to a token price, a token value. Then they make these announcements, there's a pump, they liquidate, and they constantly change their Northern Star towards a token factor of the business. That's why they're so short-term thinking. And because they're not raising capital in the traditional senses, they're not going the traditional ways of raising capital, right? And they're going to launch pads and all this sort of thing. And they're reliant on that token holder to help fund the business, which means that there's a very short-term thinking. How do we get away from that? And how do we get into a longer-term, 2 years, 6 years, 12-year type mindset?
I mean, I've got opposing views with a lot of people in terms of Epic Games and Tim Sweeney. But I think from a strategy or a strategist, as a strategist, I think what he's done with Epic Games over the last 20 years is nothing short of phenomenal. And it's blue ocean strategy. And I think, if nobody's heard of blue ocean strategy before, I would probably I would urge them to look it up. And in fact, I wrote a piece last year because the what's his name, the chief creative officer, I think, Donald Mustard, basically tweeted during one of the Fortnite events, you know, something hashtag blue ocean. And of course everyone thought, oh, blue ocean must be some kind of content drop, and I was like, no, it's not. This actually relates to the entire strategy of what Epic Games has been doing over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think that we need more of that kind of sort of strategic thinking, where it's like, I've got this idea, but how am I going to build something that's going to be sustainable for 20 years? And I think launching a token should be one of the last things that you should actually be thinking about, not the first thing. Because if you launch a token first based on a 3 to 4 year roadmap or something that you've mapped out in your head and stuff like that, and it's on an investor deck, like you say, you're already setting something in concrete, and you're now being dictated to by the ebb and flow of that token.
Yes.
Whereas I think a lot of people, even from like Web3 games or whatever like that, is actually build the product first. Even do something more beyond MVP, because everybody's bashing out stock stuff from Unity and Unreal, you know, base stock assets, etc., stock looking gameplay and whatnot. And I think what you really need to do is think beyond that and say, I'm actually going to spend a couple of years sitting down, hunkering down, actually building this product out to a point where I could probably release a proper beta, and then look what's happening. How does the audience react and stuff like that, and then start looking at, right, now I can start thinking about tokenization, about, you know, the differences between in-game economies and external economies and token economies, and then what's my longer term view based on where I want to take this project, whatever it is, you know. Everybody, and again, it's purely based on, again, like you say, token wash trading, etc., like that, the ebb and flow there. And investors want you to launch your token ASAP because they want to make 100x straight away,
and they want you to release the game ASAP, and they want all these milestones to be delivered in a very unrealistic time frame. And it's partly a lot of the project's fault, right? They set these roadmaps out. They were like, well, it's going to take us 6 months based on no theory or no research or experience. It's going to take us 6 months to have like an MVP, another 8 months to have like a metaverse, and all these expectations are set from the onset because that's what's going to sell a token. That's what's going to sell a token. Then you've got, say, 100,000 people, or whoever, you know, how many people have bought the token with these really, really high expectations. And every milestone that you don't meet, they just take you and they take you and they take you. And it becomes, like I always say, like the community can become a mob in a matter of seconds. You know, and it's especially like it's very prominent on like the Telegram spheres and all these sort of things where you have the degen traders and the people that are there with expectations that we incorrectly set. Right. And that then becomes what we manage 9 to 5 is an expectation of an audience, not of delivery of a product. Like, you know, we go into these buildle models, like, you know, during a bear market, and we say, oh, we're building because, you know, no one has anything else to talk about other than the token price that might be on decline because Bitcoin, Ethereum, you know, shake the body and everybody wags, right? So like, no matter what you say, you're always going to be governed by these massive forces, you know, the large market caps, right? So I think we should be moving away from this dependency on tokens by itself. We should be going down a path that you aptly said in terms of the game experience, slow down to speed up kind of theory. I think, you know, going back to what you guys do, data is going to be so important in terms of what that looks like, how that evolves, and how we improve the customer experience, how we improve the gameplay, and ultimately bring shareholder value and token value back to the project. Because the better experience, right, the better value we're going to create at the end of the day. But anyway, Theo, thank you, Matt. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I actually look forward to a couple more sessions like this if you've got time in the near future, once we've got a little bit more, you know, evolution underway. Theo, I think if you've got anything else to say, I've said now, or forever hold your peace. But I will give you another segment if you want one in the future.
Oh, I'd love another segment. I enjoy chewing the fat. And yeah, if anyone wants to learn about what we're doing, give us a call. And if you really want to read my thoughts, I'm always on LinkedIn. Taking it hard.
No, I was going to ask you, do you post all your content because you are super active?
Yes, it's all me. I don't trust anyone else to actually have my thoughts.
Yeah, I would encourage every single person that's watching this this podcast or listening to the podcast to follow Theo on his various handles. We will be sharing it in the description below, so don't worry about that. But Theo, thank you very much once again for participating, and also I very much appreciate your opinion and your viewpoints on what we're building in terms of what the future of the internet might look like, and very excited to see what you guys are going to be doing with your various different partners and clients. So Theo, thank you very much and have an awesome day, mate.
You too, mate. Cheers. Thank you.